Here's your video script paraphrased with slight changes in word order. While maintaining the same writing and articulating style, I can still vividly recall the exact moment her hands trembled. We stood together at gate B6, and my grandmother clutched her boarding pass envelope with both hands. Only, there was nothing inside. "Emma," she whispered, her voice cracking with fragility. "He said there was no ticket for me." And then my dad abruptly turned away, as if she were a regrettable mistake he could simply erase. As if the $20,000 she had given them meant absolutely nothing. That devastating incident occurred on Thanksgiving. They boarded their flight to Europe, leaving her behind. I remained with her. I have never once regretted that decision. 3 weeks later, upon their return from Paris, they strolled through the arrivals area, laughing blithely. They froze, 'cause I was standing there right beside a man in a dark gray suit. And in his hand he held a folder that would irrevocably alter everything. This is the harrowing story of betrayal, of a woman who sacrificed everything, and of the profound consequences when someone finally declares enough. A bond forged in sunlight. Growing up, I never truly felt a sense of belonging within my own family. My father, Charles Whitmore, was a real estate agent consumed by appearances. My mother, Deborah, seemed far more preoccupied with diet plans and social status than with genuine human emotions. Family dinners were meticulously choreographed performances, polite small talk, thinly veiled critiques, and uncomfortable silences. But there was one individual who made life feel like pure sunlight. My grandma, Lillian. She was my dad's mother, a retired school teacher who resided in a humble, one-story home in Meridian. Every summer, she would welcome me into her home as if I were her very own daughter. While my parents jetted off on adults-only cruises, I spent warm afternoons baking cinnamon bread, diligently watering her vibrant hydrangeas, and drifting off to sleep on her couch as she softly hummed old Billie Holiday tunes. She possessed a gentle spirit but a sharp mind, a kind heart yet a firm resolve. When I cried because I hadn't been invited to my cousin's birthday party, she instead taught me the soothing art of painting. When my parents reprimanded me for receiving a B in math, she wisely said, "Grades measure numbers, not worth." She meticulously preserved everything I created, every clumsy drawing, every heartfelt birthday card. Her refrigerator was a living gallery of my childhood. And even as I matured, moved away, and embarked on my career as a nurse in Boise, I never ceased visiting her because Grandma's love for me never wavered. Unlike my parents, she never made me feel as though I had to earn her affection. And deep down, I always feared they harbored resentment for that unique bond, perhaps viewing her tenderness toward me as some kind of threat. They never explicitly articulated it, but I could discern it in the subtle clenching of my father's jaw whenever Grandma offered me praise, or the thinning of Mom's smile whenever I chose to spend holidays with Grandma instead of flying to Aspen. Still, I repeatedly assured myself they wouldn't harm her, not Grandma. I was gravely mistaken. The price of inclusion that Thanksgiving. When they arrived at her house with suitcases, radiant smiles, and tantalizing promises of a grand family trip to Europe, a part of me desperately wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that perhaps for once they genuinely intended to include her. Yet, even then, another part of me held its breath, because love in my family always came with unspoken strings. And Grandma, she never perceived those strings tightening around her. It all began innocently enough with wine, warm pie, and compliments. That felt a little too rehearsed. We were gathered around Grandma's small mahogany dining table. She had prepared her famous sweet potato casserole, and the entire room was infused with the comforting aromas of cinnamon and roasted turkey. Everyone was smiling excessively, laughing with an unsettling ease. I recognized that particular laugh. It was the same one my father employed when he was trying to close a lucrative real estate deal. I was just thinking, Dad mused, between bites, how truly amazing it would be to take this family somewhere genuinely special. You know, Europe, all of us. Rome, Paris, London, one absolutely unforgettable adventure. Grandma blinked, visibly surprised. "Oh, that sounds simply lovely," she replied, "but I don't know if my joints could manage all that walking. That's the sheer beauty of it." He beamed, radiating false charm. "We'll take it slow. You'd have your own comfortable seat. Wheelchairs would be readily available. We'd stay in hotels with convenient elevators, room service, pure luxury." Mom and my Aunt Dana chimed in, nodding enthusiastically. "Mom, you've never even been out of the country. This is your golden chance." Even my cousins, Brooke and Tyler, who barely glanced up from their phones all evening, mumbled something akin to, "Yeah, it'd be cool." I glanced at Grandma. She remained quiet, slowly stirring her tea. Then Dad added, as if an afterthought, "We just need a bit more for the bookings. Deposits are due next week. The rest is fully covered." My stomach immediately tightened. "How much is a bit more?" I asked, striving to keep my tone neutral. He smiled expansively. "Only 20,000. I figured Grandma could contribute. She's always wanted us to travel as a family, after all." The room descended into a brief silence. Then Grandma offered a weak smile. "Well, if it truly brings everyone together." I yearned to scream, but I held back because Grandma looked genuinely happy, filled with hope, like a child finally being chosen for the very first time. And after a lifetime of being marginalized by her own children, I believe she finally felt seen again. The call that wasn't a ticket, she contacted the bank the following morning. I overheard her on the phone, reciting account numbers. I stood in the hallway, my fists clenched tightly. I should have stopped her. I should have urged her to wait, to question why it was she who had to pay when no one else seemed to lift a single finger. But all I managed to say was, "Grandma, are you sure?" She gently patted my hand. "Honey, they're finally including me. It's worth every single penny." Every fiber of my being wanted to believe her. But something in the hurried, distracted way. Dad hugged her goodbye, left a cold, unsettling pit in my stomach. This wasn't a gift. It was a cold transaction. And Grandma didn't realize she was the one being shortchanged. The morning of our supposed flight to Europe, Grandma was prepared. Before anyone else. She wore her familiar navy cardigan with its distinctive gold buttons and the same black flats she always affectionately called her travel shoes. Despite not having traveled in years, her suitcase was small, almost embarrassingly so, the kind one would pack for a weekend trip, not a 3-week European tour. "I packed light," she announced proudly, so I wouldn't slow anyone down. I offered her a soft smile, but inwardly, my stomach was tied in agonizing knots. At the airport, everything unfolded rapidly. Dad took charge, barking directions like a general on a crucial mission, checking passports with an air of authority. Aunt Dana flitted about, fussing over her neck pillow and overpriced bottled water. No one really engaged with Grandma. We wheeled her modest suitcase behind us toward the international departures area. She gazed around in quiet wonder, like a child at a grand theme park, absorbing every detail. "I've never seen an airport this big," she whispered, holding tightly onto my arm. We reached the check-in desk. That's when the shift began. Dad's voice changed, sharp, tense, hushed. I heard him muttering furtively to the airline clerk phrases like "not on the manifest" and "must be a system error." I stepped closer. "What's happening?" I inquired. Dad turned, feigning a calm demeanor. "There's a mix-up. It looks like Grandma's ticket didn't go through, but it's fine. We'll sort it out." Grandma's fragile smile faltered. "Charles, what do you mean my ticket didn't go through?" He meticulously avoided her gaze. "It's probably just a website glitch. These things happen. But given the tight timing, I don't think we can fix it now." Aunt Dana interjected, shrugging dismissively. "Maybe it's for the best, Mom. The flight is long. Europe involves a lot of walking. You yourself mentioned your knees have been aching." Grandma blinked slowly, her hands tightening around the handle of her small suitcase. "But I paid," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I gave you the money." My father offered a strained smile. "Of course, and we're all going because of your immense generosity. But you truly should rest. Mom, we'll bring you back gifts, photos, stories." And then, just like that, he and the others turned and began walking toward the gate. No apology, no comforting hug. Just a dismissive abandonment. I stood frozen. My heart pounded in my chest like a tribal war drum. Around us, other families embraced, laughed, and snapped joyous photos. We stood still, just me and my grandmother, and a suitcase that suddenly felt profoundly too small. She looked at me, blinking slowly. "There's no ticket for me," she murmured again, as if vocalizing it might somehow alter the devastating reality. I reached for her trembling hand. "Then I'm not going either." She attempted to protest, her voice quivering. "Emma, you've been dreaming of this trip." "No," I firmly stated, "not without you." And just like that, they boarded a plane to Europe. And we quietly walked back through the airport doors into the cold November wind. The seat of justice, the drive home, was utterly silent. Grandma sat in the passenger seat, her hands neatly folded in her lap. She didn't cry, she didn't rage. She simply stared out the window as if observing someone else's life unfolding. When we returned to her house, she walked directly to her favorite armchair. By the window, unzipped her suitcase and began unpacking with slow, methodical movements, carefully folded sweaters, a small bottle of lavender lotion, a crisp passport that had never seen use. I stood in the doorway, uncertain whether I should speak or merely allow her to pretend nothing had happened. Instead, I walked to the kitchen and prepared her a comforting cup of chamomile tea. When I returned, she was holding an old photograph of her dad and Aunt Dana at a beach decades ago. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but her smile in that picture was bright and utterly fearless. "I truly thought maybe this time they meant it," she said quietly. I offered no response. I couldn't. The anger lodged in my throat was too thick for words to pass through. Later that night, after she had retired to bed, I sat alone at the dining table. My laptop glowed dimly in the darkness. Almost instinctively, I typed a single search term: Elder Financial Abuse Laws, Idaho. Page after page of legal articles, alarming statistics, and hotline numbers appeared. I clicked on one particular link: Office of Elder Protection, Inheritance Rights, Boise Division. There it was, clear as day. If a senior citizen is coerced, deceived, or manipulated into transferring assets under false pretenses, it may qualify as financial exploitation. I carefully copied down the phone number. The next morning, Grandma was in her garden. She wore her knit gloves and was diligently pruning dead leaves from her rose bushes. I walked out and handed her a mug of coffee. "You don't have to pretend you're okay," I said softly. She offered me a tired smile. "I'm not pretending, sweetheart. I just don't want to make it harder for you. It's already hard," I admitted. "But doing nothing? That's even harder." She looked down at the soft petals in her palm. "They're still my children," she murmured. "I know," I whispered. "But you're my family, and I won't let them do this to you." She didn't reply, but that night, I made the call. A receptionist transferred me to an individual named Victor Hensley, a lawyer with the Office of Elder Protection. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice calm, deliberate. So I did. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel utterly helpless. The unveiling Victor Hensley didn't fit my preconceived notions. It wasn't cold or excessively formal. When he arrived at Grandma's house the following afternoon, he wore a dark gray blazer, jeans, and an unexpectedly warm expression that felt genuinely unrehearsed. He gently shook Grandma's hand and sat comfortably on the edge of the armchair, like someone visiting an old friend rather than investigating a crime. "Mrs. Whitmore," he began, his tone gentle, Emma has informed me about the incident. I understand this isn't easy, but I want you to comprehend that what transpired at that airport wasn't merely hurtful. It may also be illegal." Grandma shifted, uncomfortably, clutching her teacup more tightly. "I don't want any trouble," she said softly. "They're my family." Victor nodded as if he had heard that precise sentiment countless times before. "I understand. But I am here to protect you. What they did coercing you into providing them $20,000 under false pretenses? Then abandoning you meets the criteria for elder financial exploitation." I watched her eyes flicker, doubt, then guilt, then shame. So I interjected. "Grandma, you gave them that money because they promised something they never intended to deliver. That isn't generosity. That's theft, cleverly wrapped in sentiment." Victor leaned forward slightly. "With your explicit permission, I'd like to help you recover your funds and secure your legal rights. We'll need to meticulously gather documentation. Your bank statements, any relevant texts, voicemails, and witnesses, if possible." She hesitated. Then, for the first time since the airport ordeal, she spoke with a newfound firmness. "All right, if Emma believes this is right, then I trust her." That was all the confirmation we needed. Over the next week, Victor and I worked with the quiet intensity of a brewing storm. We visited her local bank. The manager, a woman named Sharon, had known Grandma for years and paled noticeably when we explained the egregious situation. She promptly printed the statement, clearly showing a transfer of $20,000 to an account registered under my father's name. We returned to the airport and located the same airline agent who had handled our check-in, Marissa, a young woman with short braids and a remarkably sharp memory. "Oh yes," she recalled, her eyes narrowing. "I remember that older woman. She looked utterly lost. Her son claimed her health made her a risk for the flight, and they told her to simply go home. It felt wrong, very cold." She readily agreed to provide a written statement. Each new piece of the puzzle made it increasingly difficult to breathe, yet simultaneously easier to act. Back at Grandma's house, I assisted Victor in scanning documents while Grandma prepared U.S. grilled cheese sandwiches, pretending none of this was actually happening. But I could distinctly perceive the subtle shift within her. She didn't flinch when Victor uttered terms like civil case or revocation of inheritance. She even remarked, while expertly slicing tomatoes, "Maybe it's high time they realized I'm not merely some wallet in a rocking chair." Victor smiled warmly. "I'd say you're a remarkably powerful woman, Mrs. Whitmore." She blushed, much like a schoolgirl. A few days later, Victor looked up from his laptop and stated calmly, "Emma, we're ready." "Ready for what?" I inquired. He closed his folder and met my gaze directly. "Ready for when they return." Justice and Legacy 3 weeks later, they indeed returned. I knew the exact flight number. Victor had diligently retrieved their itinerary from the travel agency's booking history. Purchased, of course, using Grandma's money. I didn't inform her of my plans to go to the airport. That morning, she was at home, tending to her small rose bush by the porch. I merely told her I had errands in town. She simply smiled and handed me her shopping list, completely unaware I had something entirely different orchestrated. I arrived at Boise International Airport early, standing by the arrivals gate with Victor positioned steadfastly beside me. He wore a darker suit this time, no blazer, just sharp, authoritative lines and a calm demeanor that instinctively made people nervous. He carried a plain manila folder. Inside rested copies of the damning bank statements, Marissa's crucial written statement, and a court-authorized summons approved just 2 days prior. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Pending civil restitution, inheritance suspension request. Then I saw them. My father emerged first, effortlessly rolling to oversized suitcases adorned with stickers from Rome and Paris. My mother followed, her hair impeccably blown out, her nails freshly manicured. Aunt Dana sported sunglasses indoors and snapped selfies with Brooke and Tyler, both engrossed in something amusing on TikTok. They appeared utterly joyful, untouched by any past events, as if nothing untoward had ever occurred until there. Eyes met mine. I stepped forward, uttering no words. Victor walked purposefully beside me. "Charles Whitmore," he stated firmly. "Dana Brooks, this is for you." He handed my father and aunt each a copy of the summons. They both stared at the papers as if they were inscribed in an alien language. What is this?" Dad stammered, bewildered. Victor remained impeccably calm. "Legal notice of investigation regarding financial abuse of Lillian Whitmore. You are required to respond within 7 business days. Failure to comply may result in a formal lawsuit." Aunt Dana ripped off her sunglasses. "Are you serious? This is insane. She gave us that money." Victor calmly raised an eyebrow. "Under documented misrepresentation. That's not generosity. That's fraud." My father's face visibly darkened. "Emma, you did this." I simply nodded. "You're suing your own family." "No," I said evenly. "I'm protecting mine. You made her believe. You wanted to include her, and then you humiliated her at the gate as if she were disposable. She's old," Mom snapped defensively. "That trip would have been difficult for her, but not difficult on her bank account." I sharply interjected. They stood in stunned silence. Then Aunt Dana spat. "You've always been dramatic." Victor stepped decisively between us. "This conversation is concluded. We'll see you in mediation." And just like that, we turned and walked away. But before I departed, I glanced over my shoulder just once. And I witnessed their faces, no joy, no sense of power, just raw panic. They failed to appear for the first mediation meeting. Victor stated he wasn't surprised. People like them usually assume silence will make us simply vanish. It did not. Instead, the judge granted a default ruling in Grandma's favor. Full restitution, $20,000 to be returned within 30 days. But that wasn't all. Based on the compelling evidence of intentional deception and profound emotional harm, the court placed a hold on all inheritance claims tied to her estate. A formal recommendation was submitted: revocation of all familial inheritance rights related to my father, my aunt, and their respective spouses. A new bloom when I brought the ruling papers home. Grandma sat at the kitchen table, slowly turning them over in her hands. "They really did this," she murmured, not in disbelief, but more like a quiet confirmation of something she had tried desperately not to believe for far too long. "I'm sorry. It had to come to this," I said gently. She looked up at me and smiled, a small, sad, yet somehow lighter smile. "No, sweetheart. I'm sorry I allowed it to continue for so long." That night, she contacted her estate attorney from years ago. "Mr. Hendrick." I listened from the hallway as she issued clear, unwavering instructions. "I'd like to update my will," she stated. "Yes, I want to completely remove Charles and Dana. No portion at all. They've had enough." Later, as we sat on the porch with mugs of cocoa, she confided in me. "I'm not doing this out of anger, Emma. I just desire peace. And peace means not giving people more opportunities to hurt you." I nodded. I understood precisely what she meant in the weeks that followed. I helped her close a joint account she had opened with my father years ago. We transferred her savings into a newly protected trust. She insisted I be listed as her financial advocate. "I want you to handle things if I can't," she stated. "You'll always be able to," I whispered back. But inwardly, I knew better. Something profound within her had shifted. Not just the sting of disappointment, but the accumulated years of longing finally giving way to a quiet acceptance. Not bitterness, simply profound clarity. We slowly returned to our routines: gardening, grocery trips, baking far too many cookies we didn't truly need. But something new also began to bloom. She started sketching again, playful doodles of tulips, gentle hills, and graceful birds. I signed us up for a watercolor class at the community center, and she agreed after some characteristic grumbling. "It's never too late to begin anew," she remarked one morning, pressing the brush gently against the canvas. And it wasn't. We had started over, just the two of us. No pretense, no performance, no more waiting for apologies that would never materialize. Only genuine presence, only raw truth. And in that sacred space, Grandma was no longer a victim. She was profoundly free. The following spring, I carefully planted yellow tulips all along the fence of Grandma's yard. She had once told me when I was 8 that yellow tulips symbolized hope, not merely joy. "Joy comes and goes," she had said, "but hope is what you keep alive even when everything else fades away." I wanted her to witness that hope again every morning when she opened her curtains. By May, the garden blossomed into a sea of soft gold. Grandma stood on the porch in her worn cardigan, coffee in hand, and simply gazed at them. She didn't utter a word, but her eyes glistened. "I figured you needed something to anticipate," I said softly. She squeezed my hand gently. "I already do, honey. That summer, I made a life-altering decision. I applied to Idaho State University's master's program in gerontology and elder advocacy. I wanted to become the unwavering voice for others like her, like so many whose stories never reached courtrooms or community centers. When I informed her, she teared up. "I always knew you'd take care of people," she whispered. "I just never imagined you'd start with me." I smiled. "You're the very reason I even know how to care." Life moved forward, not without its shadows, but with a steadier, more profound light. Grandma made new friends in her painting class, people who cherished her stories, who cared nothing about bank accounts or bloodlines, only about genuine kindness. She even sold a few paintings at the local crafts fair. One of them was poignantly titled Gate B6. She never revealed its meaning to anyone, but I knew. Occasionally, we would receive mail addressed from Aunt Dana or my parents, vague cards, half-hearted attempts at reconnecting. We never opened them. Grandma would simply slide them into a drawer she had labeled unanswered and return to her book or her tea. They never apologized. They never attempted to return the money. They never inquired about her well-being. And eventually, we stopped expecting they ever would. 2 years passed. Then one autumn morning, I found Grandma sitting quietly by the window, wrapped in her favorite quilt. She looked peaceful, yet tired in a way I hadn't observed before. "I'm just a little slower these days," she whispered. "But the tulips will return next spring, won't they?" "They always do," I said, gently brushing back her soft silver hair. She nodded, her eyes slowly closing. 2 weeks later, she passed, peacefully in her sleep. No pain, no drama. Just the profound peace she had always desired. We buried her on a serene hill near the town's small lake, beneath an ancient oak tree. I placed a bouquet of fresh yellow tulips at her grave, wrapped in a ribbon with her initials meticulously embroidered LW. At the funeral, people from all corners of town came. Her painting teacher, the florist who had helped her select seeds, Sharon from the bank, and even Marissa from the airport sent flowers with a simple, heartfelt note that read, "She mattered." She did, and she still does. After the service, I stood alone by the grave, holding one last tulip. The wind gently brushed against my cheek, like tender fingers. And I swore I could hear her voice softly say, "Keep going, Emma. Keep blooming." So I did. I completed my degree, and now I work with the Elder Justice Initiative, meticulously investigating abuse, fiercely advocating for reform, and helping to rewrite the narratives for people like her. I still reside in her house. I meticulously keep the yellow tulips alive. Every year, they bloom more vibrantly. And every spring, I sit on the porch with a comforting cup of tea, gaze out over that golden fence line, and utter the same words aloud. You didn't just raise a granddaughter, Grandma. You raised a witness. You raised a fighter. And that, my dear Grandma, is enough legacy for a lifetime.